In today's video, we're going to walk through how to set up the SP404 with the Elektron Digitakt using Midi to send Midi notes, tempo, and a whole lot more. We're going to go over all of the cables that you need, how to set up those cables, different ways you can route the two machines to get the best of both worlds. Then we'll go over all of the settings that you need to turn on or off to get this to work. And finally, we're going to make a beat using this setup to see exactly what it's capable of doing and why I consider it to be one of the best, if not the perfect, portable Dawless setup. Timestamps are in the description if you want to jump to a specific part. Let's get into it. Alright, so here we are with the setup, and for this to work, we need a couple different cables because the SP404 and the Digitakt have different MIDI ins and outs, and so we need to compensate for that by getting a couple different cables, and I have affiliate links in the description if you want to get the ones I'm using. Otherwise, you can find a bunch of different ones online or at any store. So the first one that you're going to need is a Midi to TRS cable, and that's what's going from the SP404 into a normal Midi cable. So the SP's Midi is little TRS inputs, so you have to get one of these so that it works. Then you need a normal Midi cable, and then of course you're going to need to send audio from these machines. I'm also using the SP404 as an audio interface, so I'm sending signal through a USB-C cable. The one I have also receives power, so there is no power cable going into the SP404. It's all just USB-C, and I have a full video up here if you want to check it out where I talk about how to do this routing. It's a huge game changer to use it like that, and you only need to take up one cable, so it saves a lot if you're traveling or anything like that. Alright, so let's talk about how you can get these two machines working together. So the first thing you're going to need to do is go to the utility menu on the SP. So we're going to go Shift 13. We're going to click System, and we're going to go to this third menu, which is Midi. So you use the furthest knob to go there. You want to have Midi sync on auto, Midi sync out on, sequence note on, sync delay. I have it set to what it came stock as. The rest are just what it was stock. Now I do want to highlight Midi mode. I have it set to Midi mode A, and that's because of how you can use each of these MIDI tracks on the Digitakt to control the SP. So if you have it on MIDI mode A, each of the banks is a channel of MIDI. And we'll get back into that when I show you how to set up the actual transfer of MIDI information. But MIDI mode B would be, it's just the first 8 are MIDI channel 1, and then the next ones are MIDI channel 2. But for the Digitakt, MIDI mode A actually makes a little more sense. We'll get into it in a minute. So that's what you need on the SP. Now we'll go to the Digitakt. So first you need to go to Settings, go down to MIDI config, go to Sync. Clock receive you don't have to have on if you don't have anything coming into the Digitakt. Clock send though you need if you're sending out, and you want to make sure that this piece of gear is synced. Transport receive on, transport send on, and then program changes. I'm not messing with those yet. That might be in a later video once I set up all these synths behind me. So that's all you need. Now we can get this set up. So the first thing you're going to need, I'm on bank A of the SP, so I'm going to need to choose channel 1. So I'm going to hit function and click A. Once you do that, you can change the channel by just moving the knob. Again, we're going to go with 1. Now we're going to go to a keyboard for the Digitakt for MIDI channel 9. So I'm going to do function chromatic, and you can hear there's no sound, right? So you need to find the octave. So on octave 2, here we've got 9, 10, and we can turn on some effects. And you can hear that polyphony, right? We can hit all these things at the same time. 4 voices, but with multiple tracks, we can do more. In terms of routing, I am using the Digitakt as the brain or the sequencer. So I have MIDI out from the Digitakt going into MIDI in on the SP, but I'm using the SP as the audio source so that the Digitakt's audio is going into the inputs of the SP404. And then I have external source on so that it will make sound. So let me play the Digitakt. You're hearing it, but I can affect it on the SP404. I prefer this routing because the Digitakt's strength is its sequencer and the SP's strength is its effects, its master chain, but also its long sampling time. So I can have long samples that I can edit and things like that, but then I can sequence it on the SP's much better sequencer. Let me show you what I've done already with this setup. So I just want to play this pattern, and if I go into the mutes, I actually have this MIDI channel sending signal or sending MIDI notes to the SP. And if I turn on 10, I have the bass line too. Now, technically, I could have done all of this in one single MIDI channel and one single MIDI track. On the Digitakt, you get 4 voice polyphony on each MIDI track, so you could do 4 different things on one MIDI track, but you're not limited to just one channel per track. You could, like I was doing, sequence the SP404 with every single MIDI track on here. And that's a big thing because even though there's 4 voice polyphony per MIDI track on the Digitakt, on the SP, I think it's 32 voice polyphony. So you could use all 4 of these MIDI voices on each track and trigger all kinds of different things on the SP while also having 8 tracks of samples on the Digitakt, and you can sequence all of that. That's why I like using the Digitakt as the sequencer, SP as the audio interface, and things like that. So now I want to talk a little bit about why I think this setup works so well. Each of these machines have their own strengths, and the Digitakt really comes down to its awesome sequencer and the incredibly powerful sample tracks that you have. So I like to have that per step automation that you can do. With those 8 sample tracks, there's a lot you can do. So I'm thinking to use the Digitakt more as the drum machine and maybe some monophonic stuff, maybe doing some sample sound and sending that audio back into here to resample. The SP's strengths, as you already saw, it's awesome effects, it's fantastic mix bus, which we don't even have anything on yet, so we'll turn on cassette and compression. You also get the 2 bus channels. But the biggest feature of the SP404 is its massive sample time. So you can basically sample long songs into every pad, chop it up, and then if you chop it up on the SP, you could sequence it with the MIDI tracks. On the Digitakt, you're very limited with what you can send in. First of all, it's mono sampling, SP stereo if you want it to be. The Digitakt, I think, only has a gigabyte of total information, and you can only load up a much smaller amount per project or per pattern that you're working on. So these two work quite well in that sense. You get all the per step and sequencing power of the Digitakt, and then all of the long sample time, sample playback effects on the SP. Before we get into the beat making, I just want to talk a little bit about how I can imagine some upgrades to this setup. First of all, adding synths, which I plan to do with those synths behind me. You can have all of that sequenced by the Digitakt, as well as having all of the sample power. My plan is to do this complicated routing to send everything, all of the synths as a bus into the Digitakt, and then I can resample everything into the SP. There is also overbridge on the Elektron where it can send every channel as a separate track in your DAW. I haven't messed with that yet, but that might change a little bit how I route this. I'm planning to expand on that more in the future, so if you want to see more on that, hit the subscribe button. And if you use overbridge, let me know your setup. I'm curious, because that's something I'm still getting into. So that's kind of where I can see it going. Let's make a quick beat on here and see how well these two work together. All right, so I've got some sounds that I chopped up here. Let's go. So that's B. So that should be MIDI channel 2. There it is. First, let's get out of this and we'll make some drum. And I'm going to get a different drum sound. Let's get that Lin kick. There we go. And I'm just going to cut some and add some overdrive. And let's change the tempo. Let's do like 144 with some swing. There we go. Let's make some drums. So we'll just go here and put the kick. Okay, and then I want one more. And we're gonna just tone the volume down. And we're going to mess with the probability of these. Let's just do every 4th time. So we've got that. Let's get some hi-hats. Let's see now if we go to MIDI track 9, go to chromatic. All right, I like that, so we'll just get that in. Let's quantize that. Let's try cloud delay first. You can see just going to pattern, these are both at 144, so the time sync for the effect will work. So So I'm gonna just mess around with changing the pitch on everything. If you hold remain down when you're on the pitch, you can change the pitch on everything in the bank at the same time. There we go, perfect. I'm gonna add a little compressor on this, so it's just doing everything in here. There is no audio from there going in. On this MIDI channel, what I do want to do is on page 1, we need to add something on 1. So, okay, so that's 7. Copy it and paste it. And we need to quantize this. Sounds like it's a little off, so what I'm gonna check is where these are actually, yeah, you can see they're quite off time. So let's get these a little bit more set. We'll put them a little off grid, that's fine, but I want them a little more on the grid than they are. So that should be a little neater. Right, that first one's still off because we copied it. Let's get that one on the grid though. And then I'm just gonna throw this a little off time. Also on the snares, let's put these a little off. Put that a little early. And these hi-hats, we definitely need to tame the length a little bit. Maybe we can mess with the LFO a little bit for the sample start. Now we have a lot, it's almost like velocity on the hi-hats, but we're just using an LFO. I still think I want to change the pitch a little bit. Let's go down actually in pitch. Let's slow that time down a little bit. All right, so now, one of the best parts about the Digitakt, these channels, let's get a bass line and we'll just get a sound. Let's do... Oh, I like that bass. Let's get that in there. Let's get some attack on there. There we go. All right, so that's just a quick jam I did. I hope you can see the power that you can get from just these two machines and utilizing their strengths by chaining them in this way with MIDI. What ways do you use the Digitakt and the SP? Do you do it in a different way? Do you use this setup? Let me know in the comments how you do or if you're thinking about getting it. If you want to check out the full jam and get these samples as well, they are available to members on the channel. And if you want to see my first beat using just the Digitakt to see how capable even just the single machine is, check out this video next. Thanks for watching and I'll see you next week.